questions for Mr. Clendon? Yeah. So the Green Party support, at the moment, in fact, we had this year there were cuts to IR, the Crime Justice Research Centre, in 2010, the Gender Studies program. Would you support moves to get those programs back in place? Gender studies in particular is really important to queer communities studying sexuality and gender in society.
Absolutely. My word, I'm particularly concerned that Victoria is losing the Crime and Justice Research Unit, which is just madness. I mean, we have very little high quality research in New Zealand conditions about crime and the causes of crime. So yes, absolutely. And again, the rationale behind cutting those things like gender studies is that, that's not productive. Whoever got a job is through studying gender studies. It's very much that linking, it's almost trying to make education purely vocational. Gender studies are critical, as you say, to studying the role of gender, the differences, the social mechanisms that both establish and tend to reinforce gender roles and all those sorts of things. Sexuality, okay, we've moved on a lot in the last in 1989, wasn't it? We decided that gays were no longer criminals, so that's not very long. 86, thank you. I mean, that's still an evolving culture, if you like, in New Zealand. Our understanding of sexuality and what drives that, and the extent to which it affects relationships outside of purely sexual relationships. So yeah, those so-called minority, what they like to call the nice-to-have rather than the must-have. I don't buy it. Again, we don't need to pump out thousands and thousands of engineers and lawyers and doctors at the expense of a more diverse and comprehensive approach.
So working towards a free education, opening up access, how would the Greens pay for that?
I'm going to utter the heretical view that tax is not a bad thing. Quite seriously, we seldom offer tax cuts. We're suggesting, for example, a small levy on people who are earning above certain income levels to pay for Christchurch rather than borrow the money and let our kids pay the interest on it. Yes, tax and spend, essentially. We could save money too. I mean, for example, we're currently spending over $1 billion a year on corrections, of which 850 million is spent keeping people locked up. $1.1 billion of that, 3.1 million is spent on rehabilitation programs. Start putting some serious money into rehabilitation. We could take the corrections budget back to what it was 10 years ago, which was about 430 million, and that would leave $500 million available to put into education, into the health system, into whatever it might be. So it's very much about the choices you make, the priorities, and the way you spend the collective dollar. Nobody likes paying tax, I know, but equally we know that some of the highest taxed countries in the world are also the wealthiest and the best off and have the best provision of social services.
Any other question before?
You made a mention of PBRF and the kind of some of the perverse incentives that creates on universities and academics. I was just wondering if you had something, something that would replace it or augment it, or trim the edges off that create the kind of bad things, the bad outcomes in mind.
To be honest, I don't have in my mind a clear package of how we would do that, but I do think we need to put much more value on research that is done in New Zealand for New Zealanders, not to be isolationist or anything, but at the moment we're almost countering that against that. We need to recognise that research takes many forms, and that some forms are more expensive than others. I mean, science labs, engineering schools, they're expensive, and we need to just recognise that to the extent that science technology is actually a huge economic opportunity for us as well. We can't continue to make our living out of milk powder and pine logs. We just need to recognise that for the investment that it is. So assign intelligent amounts of money to the research base that is going to serve our needs, but not to try and categorise things, not the right word. We've sort of trapped ourselves in this classification that if things are internationally acknowledged as being good research, then we give credence to that as well. It's the value base that under that. We're not, I think, evaluating research in the context of what is for our collective benefit, what is to our collective good. So I can't offer you a package or model for that, but it's certainly, I think it's something we do need to work through.
I think we've only got time for one question, and I'm going to take it.
So there.
How important in any coalition talks or confidence-led talks, how important is tertiary education to the Green Party, and are there any specific policies which you might want to get out of those agreements from either of the main parties?
Yeah, good question. To be fair, it's not one of our top three. We're going into the election saying that the three things we will focus on the most over the next 3 years, and that would certainly influence our any deals we make in terms of supporting government, would be raising kids out of poverty, getting our rivers clean enough to swim in, and creating sustainable, well-paid, green-collar employment. So those are the top three. Education, in a sense, has a place in all three of those. But in terms of specific policies, I guess the debt burden would be the key thing, to take that debt burden off students, because it's incredibly counterproductive. It is driving a lot of our graduates overseas, and unlike the fellow who was speaking previously, I think there's actually real value in retaining our own graduates rather than importing other people's. Absolutely, we do want some of our graduates going overseas, and we want other people coming here. But I do see that we need to retain a lot of our own knowledge, because people who, particularly for teachers, as he mentioned, I think people need to live and grow up in a culture to be able to teach successfully in it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of headline stuff, I do think dealing with the debt monster would be our top line in terms of a negotiation with it.
Thank you.
All right, well, please thank David Clendon very much for coming to our summit.